Hello, and welcome to Comically Pedantic, where we take a detailed look at the complicated concepts, characters, and history of comic book culture. I'm your host, Derek L. Chase, and joining me again on this episode is the wonderful Corinne Levy.
Woo! Final episode!
I know, this is, I've been looking forward to doing this, not because, I'm having a lot of fun recording with you, and obviously I want that to continue. But I've been looking forward to ending the coverage on this specific thing.
Yeah, let's shut this book. You and I are great. We're doing a good time. But my God, let's get rid of these people from our lives.
I will tell you, just a couple days ago, I opened up Twitter and it was just ComicsGate this and like all over the fucking place. And I went and I looked for it, and it's just so it's the same thing over and over, and
Yeah.
I just you can't really give much more to these people, because it's like, okay, you're saying the same fucking thing
Yeah, big shit wheels keep on turning.
right.
It is not stopping.
Before we get into everything, I have to ask, what is your bright spot for the week?
My bright spot. What? So many things are bright and spotted. I went on a hike today. That was great. I got to eat a sandwich today. That was also great. Um, I I have completely forgotten everything that has happened this
I like
week.
that.
Apparently,
I like that your bright spots are like, I got to go for a walk and I got to eat a thing.
yeah. No, the lemonade stand I just told you about 10 minutes ago is so like top notch. Again, okay, well, for the people who haven't heard yet, right across the street from my home uh is a small group of children that are like selling lemonade on top of a radiator box,
Mhm.
or like one of just those big metal boxes that just come out of the ground. And it's so fun to me. I yelled to them from my porch. I was just like, "How much?" And they said $1. And then I ran across the street to get my watery lemonade, and I'm living my best life. So yeah, I got to walk outside, I got to eat a thing, and I got to drink a thing. I'm set. My basic needs are met.
Whereas like I'm looking back at my bar, and I have like 2 new bottles of alcohol, and I'm just like, ooh, when do I get to open these? That's
I mean, hey,
I'm planning.
that's great too.
Yeah.
Why not? I think it's because like I now work with wine every day.
Mm-hmm.
And like so whenever we open a bottle, like, we taste it,
Yeah.
to see if it's different, whatever. Or like, if the bottle's been open for a couple days, then like, you want to make sure it's still good for sampling. We have to taste it. So like, not that I'm sick of wine yet, but I just consume a lot of small amounts of wine.
Yeah.
Like like I'm not chugging bottles at my job. That would be a problem. But it's just like it's always like an ounce every other day, just smattered in there. Like Tuesday's a Syrah, and then like Wednesday's a Pinot Grigio, and it's just like I'm
I
gonna
do
have
love Pinot
water.
Grigio.
It's a good one. I'll have to bring a bottle for you. It's a
Oh,
nice one.
thank you.
So we can celebrate our final episode.
Yes. So I mean, we kind of went on like a really long adventure together over the past few episodes. Like, we started talking about the the growing attacks on like Zoe Quinn or Anita Sarkeesian, and we talked about like how that spawned Gamergate and the methodology that went behind that, and even a
Yeah.
little bit of like what came out of there, like Anita Sarkeesian and Zoe Quinn both starting different organizations to help fight back against some of this stuff. Zoe
Which is
Quinn's,
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's great stuff. I'm very happy about that. Oh,
It's still
actually,
so oh, go ahead,
I
and
just
then I'll go.
I went back to a one of my favorite podcasts from a while back. They have been on hiatus, and I just have not really gotten around to listening to some of their older stuff.
Yeah.
Well, newer but older. And it turns out they did an entire episode about Davis Arini, who we talked about was the guy with like the little like the
Yeah.
whiskey and the sometimes lit cigarette and
Oh, I was thinking about him the other day, and, like, I hated it and I loved it at the same time,
he
because just
apparently
thinking about him is so weird. I'm so mad I know about him now.
he apparently
Uh,
did a Matrix 4 review that is absolutely hysterical if you know anything about the Matrix.
oh
He just
god.
gets every goddamn part of it wrong.
Amazing.
So I'm looking very much forward to watching that in my free time.
Yeah.
And a thing that made me very happy about that is he had like maybe 200 views on that. So
Yeah.
like he went from being a very brief star in all of this to everyone thinking he was laughable and not paying any attention to him. I
Yeah,
love
his comment burnt out fast, thankfully.
it. Yeah.
But what I was gonna say though was, I'm just glad that like these people who've like, I mean, at least with Gamergate, we haven't heard. Well, Anita was kind of part of ComicsGate, really, but just the fact that they were able to do something awesome, like coming out of like such a horrible experience, probably like a horrible part of their life, like,
Mhm.
and they were able to just be like, I'm gonna try and make this world better, even
I'm
though it was
so
pretty
happy
shitty to
about that.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super awesome. So I will forever be clapping for that. But
So,
happy things in the final episode.
yeah, we do have some happy things to go over. We unfortunately do have to start though with a little bit of what came out of what we discussed last episode.
Yeah,
So the high profile victimization of both Peter Simeti and Edwin Boyette, that helped to fill a narrative hole in the Comicsgate mythology. See, the online harassment lobbed at trans and female creators left the general public extremely wary or largely turned off by the idea of associating with the group or even engaging with their ideas, which makes sense. If you see people being shitty, you don't necessarily want to be part of that.
very
um,
true.
Having two prominent figures harassed in a very public and dangerous manner, who are at least tangentially related to the group, provided a convenient excuse for some of their actions, even if Samedi's involvement was through remaining neutral or from circumstantial evidence. Like Ethan Van Sciver's immediate push to blame the anti-Comicsgate crowd and to highlight these incidents the moment they happened was crucial to fulfilling this role. Now, the argument could be made that their actions were bad because they had to deal with this level of engagement from their enemies. Perhaps more importantly, they could position themselves as the real victims in their campaign. You know, if you can point to a really shitty thing happening to you, you can say, look, I'm the victim here.
Yeah,
The only downside is that Peter Simeti had still not claimed to be Comicsgate, and thus the only Comicsgate publishers were either run by a devout Christian nationalist or were indie groups crowdfunded specifically for their fans. Regardless of how often people like Van Sciver would loudly proclaim their movement was massive, this severely limited their audiences. Crowdfunded campaigns exceeded their goals, sure, but the idea was to branch out and grow bigger. For this, they still needed a mainstream outlet friendly to their cause. So, in July of 2020, a Twitter user pointed out that Dynamite Entertainment's publisher, Nick Barucci, made a surprising appearance on a Comicsgate stream. The company itself was famous for publishing comics like The Boys, James Bond, Game of Thrones,
oh
John Wick, Red Sonja, and Vampirella. So there was a much larger audience than that of like the indie publisher Alterna.
yeah, like I know those names. That's pretty big. That means something.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, oh no. I'm stressed now. We're
The
only like
pros-
10 minutes in and now I'm stressed.
so the prospect of a publisher cozying up to a group widely known for their hateful attacks left many uneasy and others angry. Comic book fans who opposed Comicsgate flooded Twitter and other social media sites to let it be known that this course of events needed to be stopped. And this only grew louder when Dynamite launched their own crowdfunding campaign for a Vengeance of Vampirella variant cover. Dynamite had a history of crowdfunding variant covers for their comics, so this would require little to no attention from most, except for this time, they featured the character of Cecil from the indie comic Cash Grab by writer Cecil Jones and artist Donald DeLay. Cash Grab is a comic largely funded by the ComicsGate community. But the real reason for the outrage is that both Jones and DeLay have a long history of awful behavior online, including several racist or sexist tweets. Jones's association with ComicsGate and Ethan Van Sciver in particular did little to quell the growing frustration creators and fans had with Dynamite. Almost immediately after these events were made public, resignations poured in. So basically, you have Dynamite Entertainment doing a crowdfunding campaign, and they're going to use artists
Right.
that were very much associated with Comicsgate and very much problematic even outside of that.
Yeah.
And people did not fucking have this.
Okay, so then they have people resigning from that company because they're like, we don't like the decisions that they're making.
Right.
Okay.
So, several of the high profile talent behind comics like Red Sonja and Pathfinder made public statements on their way out, just as heavy metal band Gwar removed their own comic from the company. I don't know if you know the band Gwar. They're
I
fucking
don't,
wild.
but Pathfinder sounds familiar and I like oh, you know what? No, it's not familiar because Pathfinder is just a different kind of tabletop role play game.
Uh,
Um, it's just like D&D's cousin with different math. So, wrong nerd genre. Putting back on comic book nerd hat. My bad.
so things were taking a downward turn, and in response, Dynamite decided to release a statement from publisher CEO Nick Barucci as they ended their commitment to the Cecil variant cover, stating that they didn't think the cover would be so polarizing. Many creators shared their surprise
Because
that a
it was just
mainstream
one cover, right? Just one cover?
right, um,
Okay.
but it's a particular character, and it's just very strange to choose these people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, So many of the creators shared their surprise that a mainstream publisher would risk being associated with a group widely known for their hateful tactics. Writer
Yeah.
Carla Pacheco spoke to comicbook.com about this fear in detail. Quote, the final line for me was, I think 2 weeks ago. That was just when screenshots were being posted of Nick Barucci being on Comicsgate podcast and apparently paying to get his comments promoted on a Comicsgate podcast.
Oh.
I was just like, yeah, I'm good. I'm done. So this was unfortunately not the first time that Dynamite had made Pacheco uncomfortable.
Okay.
Earlier in the year, Barucci gave the keynote address at an annual Comics Pro Industry Summit, where some familiar themes seemed to appear on the subject of culture wars. Before we dig too far into this, I think it's relevant to discuss what Barucci had to say on the subject of being a young fan.
Okay.
Quote, I made new friends at the comic store because it was a haven where I could talk to people about comics and to get excited for when I would have money to buy more comics, and this fostered a community in the shop. There are sliding doors that happen in life. Here's mine. My parents sent me to a private and elite high school, and it sucked. I was the nerd. I read comics. I didn't like sports. I wore hand me down clothes. Oh, and my name was Nicola. Not endearing. High school really sucked. But I was able to get through it all with some friends and the comics and heroes I loved. Barry Allen, Matt Murdock, Hal Jordan, Prince Namor, and others. So, Baruchi's experience in high school mirrors many young comic book fans, down to finding some of the only solace available through the fictional four-color worlds presented by Marvel, DC, and others.
Yeah, and
This
the way he's like talking about it, like definitely, like I think I said it in the first episode. Like I have more comfort talking about these things in a comic book store or like in person with people. So
Mhm.
it's like, you know, he definitely paints the picture accurately. So
Yeah, I mean
at
that's
least with that beginning part.
it is an isolating experience to be so into something that is like a niche topic that you can only really find others in a very specific spot. Like comic book stores fulfill a very weird need.
Yeah,
that
because it's like you can then go there. Like, if you go to a Barnes and Nobles, like,
Mhm.
you've got every genre. So, like, sure, you might feel a little weird like going into like, your graphic novel section, you might just be like, "Oh my god, people are gonna think I'm like weird." But
Well,
if
I
you're
mean,
going into a comic book store, it's like everybody is going there for the same reason. So it's a little more like, okay, there's this pressure that shouldn't be there is lifted off, you
yeah,
know?
and in addition to that, like I recently went to a Barnes and Noble, and I spent a lot of time just kind of looking around at different spots, and I ended up at one point in the graphic novel section,
Yeah.
and there was an older guy there who I wanted to get into specific comic books, and he was like pulling people that worked there and asking them a lot of questions, and most of them didn't really like have the most knowledge on these things, so like I kind of
Yeah,
listened.
they don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, you're working in a place where you have to know so much about everything, whereas like comic books, you may not know about every comic book that comes in, but you can kind of help people out. You can move them here or there.
Yeah.
Um, at worst case, you'll kind of know what publishers to think of, what genres to think of, things like that.
Yeah.
Um, and it's weird because like in for Nick Barucci to go through this, I think um he's really getting an idea of like what it is like to form your community. Y-
Mhm.
So essentially Barucci found this community to be like a home, that comic book shop was a second home for him. And he
Yeah.
underlines this concept when discussing the relationship between publishers and retailers, later on stating, "We are family. We can argue, but we need to find the middle ground and work together. And that means not always getting 100% of what we want." So, Barucci is aware of the collaborative and restorative nature that having a community, especially one built by and for outsiders, can be for those that are in need. This intense relationship between consumers, fictional media, and corporations is what fosters the feeling of deep connection with the material and the sincerely felt betrayal if any element of this triad is changed or damaged. The downside to such strong correlations like this is that when they change, like with Gamergate, includes representing or more people like uh, queer folks. If you try to add more of them
Yeah.
to the family, then the outrage is directed at any of those alterations. This is particularly harmful when those same changes are the ones that would bring in other outsiders, regardless of their vulnerability or similarities in circumstances to the original members. This is in part
Yeah.
why it is alarming to see Dynamite be supportive of ComicsGate or Barucci's comments further in this keynote address about cancel culture. Like, you can't say I made a community
Yeah,
that is
because
like
it's like I don't know, when he's talking about, the feeling of like the outsiders and like, the points of having a community on a surface level, like it does sound like if anything that he's anti gamer or comics gate. I got my
right.
gates confused. Oh god. There's too many gates. Cuz yeah, like cuz then it would be like yeah, why would you be opposed then to having just new material out there in the world? But, obviously they're not just accepting that quote as it
It's
is.
it's a thing where like you can say and you kind of feel a particular way, but like there needs to be a little bit of introspection here. If you're saying that like I want to address everyone, well, if you're addressing the people that are excluding others, you are helping that exclusion, you
Yeah.
know. And he goes on further to talk about cancel culture and like how that affects us. And I'm going to quote a little bit more because I think this is also kind of important.
Okay.
So he says, "I'm going to say something that may come across as too blunt, but I feel it needs to be said. The overwhelming majority of retailers are communicative and are up for discussions. At times, there is a retail minority that are loud and the equivalent to keyboard cops, and they may not realize it, but they border on bullying. They prefer cancel culture over discussion and understanding and mutual cooperation. Cancel culture for some has allowed politics and personal views to affect the comics you order or the experience your fans have at your store. We need to be open to everything. We need to service everyone, which is like mind boggling here because he is trying to denounce people who are saying, like, hey, don't be a dick online while describing the exact issue that they are fighting against, right? Like,
Yeah, his I don't know, I feel like he's kind of giving, like, that classically, like, political, like, statements where
mhm,
they're just so, like, vague and you don't really, like, I don't know, if I just heard that out of context and I didn't like if I heard it before we did the podcast,
yeah.
I would I would be so confused on what this man is trying to, like what question he would be answering, you
Right.
know?
His pleas for understanding and acceptance are they're like a little bit they're admirable to an extent if you just take them at their surface level word, you know. If you
Yeah.
if you dig any deeper, it's you just fall into a really shitty hole. It's the balance fallacy, right?
Mhm.
This occurs when two sides of an argument are assumed to have equal or comparable value without regards to the merits. In like this instance, Barucci wants it to be clear that those taking a stand against Christian nationalists like Vox Day or outright harassers like Richard C. Meyer and Ethan Van Sciver are the problem. When Barucci claims cancel culture is stifling creativity within the marketplace, he is stating this while a group is actively campaigning against diversity. Their
Yeah.
stated goals relate to apolitical storytelling, but we've already discussed in exhaustive detail how this actually means only their specific form of politics is acceptable.
Right.
It it you see this shit on like Fox News when they bring up like let's say climate change. You
Yeah.
have a scientist representing the like 90% of scientists who agree that climate change is real and that it is a made much more of a problem due to man's involvement. And they put that person representing 90% of people up against one other person. And so
Yeah.
you're giving the look of like a 50-50 split when it's clearly not.
No.
The other main problem with the idea of cancel culture is that the consequences of being canceled never seem to have extremely long lasting effects. Like famously canceled comedians like Louis C.K. or political journalists like Mark Halperin still have lucrative careers, even though they may not have the same status that they once did. For many,
Yeah.
like it, you don't really get anything out of that.
It's just like, I don't know, like, whenever people kind of are like, "Oh, like, cancel culture is stupid," like, all this stuff, like, there to an extent, I'm like, "Yeah, like, it kind of is." But that doesn't mean like, I'm all for people taking accountability of their shit, though, but to me, I guess I just think, like, at this point, they're so different. Because if you're taking accountability for your shit, you're accepting the consequences of the thing that you did wrong. Um, but that doesn't really happen. So, as we've
Right.
seen.
Like, facing consequences um is seen as like the most horrific thing that you can possibly go through by some of these people. And like just the idea that you might face some consequences for what you have done is it's it's terrifying to them.
Yeah.
But like Chuck Dixon, we've talked about before, he's not
Mhm.
guaranteed a job regardless of how much work he's done in the past, right?
Yeah.
So having a specific job or a specific form of entertainment, that's not a human right. So telling someone like you have done like you're a comedian, you have done countless things that are harmful to a particular community.
Yeah.
Louis C.K. Let's just go with him. Uh,
Sure.
you have done things that are harmful. We are no longer going to work with you. So he is not, even though he is a comedian, he is not guaranteed the job of a comedian
Right.
because, you know, he can go on and do something else. That's fine. And you know what? He made millions of dollars before he was canceled. So it's still not like
Yeah.
life ending, you know?
No, he's still secure, like, even though he can't do his funnies anymore.
Right.
Like
Barucci and other critics that claim this is a matter of free speech being shut down, all that does is reveal that they fundamentally don't understand how free speech within America works, and that the stated goal is to abolish the free speech of any that criticize them. Saying, like, hey, you are encroaching upon my free speech because you don't like a thing I said. Um, one, no, that's not how that works. But two, what
Yeah.
you're saying, you can't say this. You're not allowed to say bad things to me.
Which is, like, not correct. Like,
Right.
I think people forget that, like, kinda like you're saying, where it's like, "Oh, I can say whatever I want because it's free speech." It's like, "Okay, well, you can't yell fire in, theater." Like, you
Well,
know?
also, like, in America, free speech means the government cannot tell you what you are allowed to say, and you cannot, like,
Yeah.
you cannot be arrested by the government for saying a specific thing. Now, like, if you caused a problem because of, like, what you said, that's different. But, like, you are allowed to have a political opinion and say your political opinion. That's
Yeah.
fine. If the government steps in, that's bad. That is what free speech is covered under in America. It is
Yeah.
not like you are guaranteed a job because, like, free speech says that you can say these things.
Yeah,
That's
if
not
you
how
don't
this
line
works.
up with the company's, like,
Mhm.
whatever mission statement or whatever kind of vision they're going for, they don't have to hire you. Like,
Right.
much like you don't have to share your shitty opinions to the world on Twitter every day.
Right. Or in Ethan Van
So,
Sciver's case, his, like, endless live streams that he
yeah,
consumes.
on his weird YouTube channel where everything is scripted and
No,
makes me
like,
feel uncomfortable.
his weird, so he does, like, live stream, and this is a complaint I see constantly against him because he's always late in his on, like, fulfilling his job duties. Like, on he does Cyber Frog, it's a comic book. Um, he's always late in doing that, but he spends hours of his day on YouTube, just
Yeah.
just live streaming with people, and it's like, yeah, if you want to do that, that's fine, but, like, you also have another job. You know,
Yeah,
your job
maybe,
is
like,
not.
live stream doing your job. I mean,
Yeah,
people do that all the time.
yeah.
Two birds, one stone, baby.
So Dynamite has gone through some of this stuff before, including from ComicsGate. During the protests in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder at the hands of a police officer, Dynamite had included some of their comics in a bundle that was about and by persons of color. So money raised from this bundle went to charities like the Bail Project to help those needing to meet bail, to be reunited with their families,
Yeah.
and other stuff like that. Many in the Comicsgate community were angered by their involvement. This is possibly due to
Oh, stupid people, shut up.
This is
Oh my
possibly due
god.
to Dynamite having previously supported high-profile members of Comicsgate, such as when they commissioned Ethan Van Sciver to produce variant covers using his creator-owned characters and Dynamite staples. So, like, again, they did that one variant cover that caught a lot of attention, but they have in the past had Ethan Van Sciver on, like, to do other variant covers. So it's
Well,
starting
they
to, like,
wanted to include everybody.
right. So this event in particular, the bundle to help the Bail Project after George Floyd's murder,
Which
um,
sounds very great. I feel like
that
not a lot of companies did that, so that's
no,
cool
and
that a company actually did something, that's nice.
it's great.
Yeah.
That brought new focus on Barucci when Van Sciver himself took to YouTube in the aftermath of the Cecil variant cover scandal
Wait,
to
can I
detail.
guess what happens?
Oh yeah.
Did Ethan Van Helsing write a scathing review on our on our Dynamite Man?
It's
Because
kind
he
of
didn't do what he wanted, but he used to do what he kind of wanted?
it's kind of a little bit worse than that because he goes so far as to, like, reveal information he probably should not have.
Oh, okay, I mean, I was close, and
And
honestly, I don't
you're on. You're like it,
y y
it's
guys, this is character development. I went in being like, "Oh gosh, oh no." I listened to, like, part of the first episode because it came out today. Ayo. Um, but and I was like, "Wow." I laugh a lot at the end of my sentences. which I still do. That's not gonna change. But I really had no clue what I was getting into, and now I, like, know shit. It's crazy. I don't know how to
So,
feel about that.
you
The
know a
curse
lot
of
about
knowledge.
this is shit that you're gonna have like conversations with people at parties, and you're gonna be like, oh, did you hear about this thing? And they'll be like, no, why would I have ever heard of this thing?
And then they'll be like, "And why have you heard of
Yeah.
this thing? We know you." And I'll be like, "I've been cursed in the best way."
So in the aftermath of the Cecil variant cover, Van Sciver went to Twitter and YouTube in particular to
Right.
detail how the CEO of Dynamite had been secretly helping him for years, but kept it quiet in order to protect the publishing. So during this video, Van Sciver repeatedly mentions the meetings that the two men had and the help he received learning everything he could about publishing before stating that his working relationship with the company was over in response to how they handled the criticism of working with ComicsGate. This, if true, would represent that both the largest comic book publisher willing to at least implicitly promote ComicsGate was in, like, they had been involved for a while, and
Yeah.
also the first time a publisher was completely rebuked after showing their support. It's
Oh, wow.
so like Nick Barrucci, who was helping Ethan Van Sciver, according to him, was keeping it on the DL so that like people weren't coming after Dynamite. And then they did one thing that Ethan Van Sciver didn't like, and he goes out and tells everyone about this. And again, it could
Ugh,
be true, it could not be. I have no idea. But if it is,
yeah.
that's fucking weird. And why? Like, why would you have done this
That's like
at
some
all?
weird, like, Great Gatsby affair. Like, it's just
So, like,
uh,
and it's another example. Ethan Van Sciver cut ties with someone who was no longer useful, just like what would happen, like what had happened with Edwin Boyette or like Moose Bauman, like all, people who walked away from projects. Um, so Moose Bauman walked away from coloring a comic that Van Sciver had worked on.
right.
And when he did, he found that ComicsGate supporters attacked him and made fun of his wife's cancer diagnosis. So like,
I feel like we've talked about this before.
no, it's just shit that keeps happening.
Oh,
It's
okay.
history repeating
Oh,
itself.
no. Oh, I fell off the wagon. I was on it, and then I fell off. Uh, man, I could have sworn there was another one where people were making fun of somebody's cancer.
Oh, it is, but it's just not this particular person.
Oh, that's so sad.
It's the gift that keeps on giving. This shit
It's
that like
the it's the sinkhole that keeps getting shit thrown into it. I I'm gonna live by the sinkhole theme now. We've
I
made
like it.
it only took me 5 episodes to find it, and now I've stuck with it for the end.
So Van Sciver's parasitic approach to relationships keeps ending with a complete denouncement of the other party, except in this particular instance, it left ComicsGate without a major publisher once again. And that brings us to the cum dumpster aficionado, Richard C. Meyer.
Oh, no, he's back. Oh,
we're gonna
no, it all went wrong.
we're gonna spend some time talking about him today, because there is some very fun stuff that actually
You know
came out
what?
of this.
After these 5 episodes, well, now 6 episodes, the C has to stand for come, right?
I have no idea what it stands for. And you know,
It does now.
he
It do
changed his
now.
YouTube channel. Like it used to be Comics and Diversity, and now it's like your boy Zach or something like that. And I have no idea. Like I'm not going to watch his videos. I don't care that much.
Yeah. It's
But
also
like I
really sad though, because every time his name comes up, I unfortunately think of, oh, John C. Riley, and then I'm like, "Oh, no, what did he do?" But
I
it's
love
not
John C. Reilly.
him. Thank
So
God it's not him.
in 2015, years before ComicsGate made its name and loads of cash, Meyer was able to successfully crowdfund a comic series known as Jawbreakers. The series itself isn't that important, but it lays the groundwork for a hilarious string of events.
Mm.
First, it should be noted that Jawbreakers just made its funding goal, which is a far cry from how ComicsGate projects, specifically under Meyer, would perform later. The fact that before Meyer's notoriety was firmly established, he was just barely able to raise $3,500 brings into sharp focus a monetary incentive for why pushing ComicsGate was so important for him on an individual level. The
Yeah.
money raised for this comic is applaudable, and many would hope to get even a fraction of that for some of their projects. But it's nothing compared to the more than $400,000 a Jawbreakers book drawn by Malin and with covers by Van Sciver that Meyer was able to raise with ComicsGate support.
Ah.
Like, he went from doing a very look $3,500. Great, I am happy for you. That's wonderful.
Yeah,
But
I'd
then
love to have that.
$400,000 brought in
That's a
by people.
jump.
People are just funneling money to them, and it
Yeah.
like, look, good on you, I guess. It's just fucking weird. And
Yes.
like, even after Meyer's falling out with his chosen community, which we will get to a little bit later, he was still able to pull in over $106,000 for a single project. So even after Meyer is not maybe the best person under the Comicsgate banner, he's
Correct.
still well, I mean, by their standards, he
Ah,
is still getting a lot of money. Like, there's a vocal amount of people that want to help.
interesting.
So with an immense amount of funding behind a single book, Meyer now had to focus on distribution. And that's where Antarctic Press, a small publisher known for satirical political comics from both sides of the spectrum, suddenly becomes useful. The two parties reached an agreement where Antarctic Press would publish and distribute Meyer's book, with the profits being split between the two. The announcement of this partnership drew immediate pushback from several retailers and prominent comic book professionals. Some of the comic shop owners refused to carry the book altogether, so Meyer decided to tweet the names and addresses of those stores, causing a bombardment of negative reviews from
Oh,
those opposed to
God.
this practice. And unfortunately, that's just the beginning of this fucking story. So
Yeah.
we start off with, like, it's doxing comic book shops. I don't know if that's a thing, but I guess, like,
I
he's
mean,
like,
it is now that they did it.
they were just kind of like, hey, this specific comic book shop doesn't want to carry my thing. Here's their phone number, here's their address. Which is what you were doing, is saying, go harass this person.
So stupid. Like, have these people just never had a business rejection in their life? Like,
No, that I'm sure they have. They're just they can't handle
their heads just got too big. They turned into like little ego balloons.
I think there's this uh they need to feel victimized in order to, like, get their point across. But then there's also the idea that, like, the slightest bit of pushback means that they're shutting everything down, you know?
Which is
It
so
it,
stupid. Like,
it is.
what
No
an
one
in like, ugh.
no one cares that much. Like, just stop being a dick, and it's not a big problem anymore.
Like, you are not being discriminated against. Like,
I
that's
mean,
not what this is.
look, he kind of is, but he's being discriminated against because of his own fucking actions. It's not for anything else.
Yeah, because of political opinion. Like, if it was anything else, like, if it was like race or orientation or creed or whatever, I'd be like, you know what? Yeah, give those people a hard time because they did discriminate you because of like personal things that you can't change. But you can
Mhm.
100% change your opinion in the way that you just behave. Like,
And, like,
sit
saying
down.
I don't like this comic is different from saying this company is destroying the comic book industry because they're letting minorities in. Like, those are
Yeah.
wildly different.
And imagine, like, there probably were some comic books that were just like, or comic book shops that were just like, "Yeah, we just like, this is what I don't know, these are the comics we focus in. I'm not looking to add any new material."
Yeah.
And he's just gonna assume probably that it's like, "Oh, it's because I'm part of ComicsGate. I'm gonna go fuck it up now." Like, oh my god. Sit down. Take a nap. Eat a
So
cookie, feel better the next day.
this is where we come to Mark Waid, who's a comic writer famous for his run on the Avengers, The Flash, Justice League, Captain America, X-Men, Archie, and pretty much like any famous character in comic books. Like
Yeah,
he's
those I know.
yeah.
I'm familiar.
Mark Waid has written a fuckload of these. I have a few of Mark Waid's books in front of me.
Cool.
He's he's good. He's not my favorite writer, but he does a very good job. He's very
Yeah,
serviceable, and he knows the characters. He knows what he's doing.
cool.
So he decides to write a post on Facebook where he detailed calling Antarctic Press to leave a message inquiring if they were aware of Meyer's online behavior. So he just calls them up and he's like, "Are you sure you want to work with, like, this person has said and done these things?"
Yeah.
And shortly after, Antarctic Press announced that they would no longer publish Jawbreakers. And in the announcement, they specifically point out the blurred lines between art and artist when it comes to this comic and the difficulty with which they made their decision.
Mhm.
Essentially, Meyer was too much of a potential problem for them to risk a business relationship. But unfortunately, Meyer did not see it that way. Like, and I look, there is a weird, blurry line. I still have a bunch of Harry Potter stuff.
I was
And
thinking the same thing. Like,
and I still like my Harry Potter stuff. Um, I'm not a big fan of J.K. Rowling.
yeah.
Uh, and I'm not going to throw out the stuff that I have, you know? Uh,
No,
and I
you
can,
just acknowledge the context and,
mm-hmm,
you then interpret the book how you need to. Like, there's nothing outright offensive about the books, they're a young adult story that give hope to people,
right.
which
And
is cool.
I've used in previous episodes, I've used Orson Scott Card as one of my things because I like Ender's Game and I like that series. I was Speaker for the Dead is one of my favorite sci-fi books. It's just really
Right.
cute and weird. And Orson Scott Card is a huge homophobe, and I would never buy his books uh like from a retailer. I would just get them secondhand or something. And
Yeah.
it doesn't take away, like, I acknowledge that he has a particular way of thinking, and it does bleed a little bit into the books that he writes, just same as J.K. Rowling stuff bleeds into Harry Potter. But like, you can acknowledge that and still get something out of those books. But that's different. Like, if I were going into a business relationship, I would never choose to go in with Orson Scott Card or J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, again, it's the whole like a company has a face and they know that what they want to sell and they know what kind of personality, what kind of like, they the whole point of a mission statement, which is such like, first level like business degree kind of crap. But
Mhm.
like it's true. Like that's what they have going on. And they are allowed to reject you if you know you're not speaking what they want you to speak.
Right. And so, taking to Twitter, Meyer publicly accused Wade of harassing Antarctic Press into dropping the title, specifically claiming that he received a call from the owner who was crying and begging forgiveness because he couldn't handle the bullying that Wade directed toward him, which definitely does not sound true to me. I don't know.
No, that doesn't at all. I picture it anything just being like a Zoom meeting
Yeah,
and
just
just
like, hey,
being
we're not
like,
doing this.
we've decided to terminate and like or like in the most passive way, like
Mhm.
one of those just like weird around the bush sentences where it's like, wait, are we done here? Like
Yeah.
what's happening?
So whether or not what he said is true, I have no evidence that it's not, but just based on what he fucking said, I don't think so. It's
Now that I'm
interesting.
thinking about it though, it also sounds like 100% one of those guys who's like, "Hey, you want to go on a date?" And then you're just like, "No, sorry, like I'm not interested." And they'll be like, "Whatever, you're a bitch anyway." And then they like leave. Like that's what this sounds like. But business. It's
It's
weird.
interesting to see Meyer's reaction to the online abuse, considering the legions of fans that followed him and Ethan Van Sciver into doing the exact same things. Like, he's saying, oh, they're fucking bullying this company. And like, what the fuck do you think you've been doing?
Yeah. Again,
Meyer went
sit down, take a nap.
Meyer went further, though, and shared a post from Reddit and 4chan that claimed CB Cebulski from Marvel had received numerous angry emails from Antarctic press threatening legal action against Mark Waid's conduct. Supposedly, Waid threatened physical violence against the company for publishing Meyer's book. And all of this is unsubstantiated, and Antarctic Press actually publicly denied ever contacting anyone at Marvel over anything to do with Meyer. So the
This
book
whole thing
itself.
is stupid. Threatening physical violence against a company. What are you gonna do? Punch their elevator? Like,
That'd be great. Like the book itself
just a
was
small man kicking ferns in front of the corporation building. Uh,
uh,
that's 100%. That is 100% what somebody would do. They wouldn't be fighting people. That's not what we do here with comic book communities.
no,
We we are
inanimate
impersonal.
objects.
we're
So
we're
the
throwing planters at nothing.
so the book itself was even published, but from the new ComicsGate publisher started by Meyer called Splatto Comics. And like, so again, the book was published and distributed.
Yeah.
It's just the one publisher that like it didn't go with him. So like overall, this would be just another incidence of ComicsGate's squandered opportunities due to their own actions, if not for what came immediately after.
Mhm.
So, nearly 4 months after the public back and forth between the two, Richard C. Myers sued Mark Waid for not only the intimidation of Antarctic Press, but also for defamation. According to the complaint, Waid damaged Myers' career by characterizing him as racist, continually harassing minorities, and associated with white supremacists. And if he's wondering why someone would do something like that, I have a few fucking episodes of this show I would like to play for him. Like,
Yeah.
you can't
Oh my
really
god, are
go,
we gonna go to court?
no, and we'll get to why.
This
His
was also 2 years ago, right? Like,
His complaint included that these assertions caused Meyer to miss out on opportunities to appear at conventions or search for new talent, which is why he was demanding a jury trial and damages in excess of $75,000. The issue quickly galvanized both sides of the community, with crowdfunding campaigns started to fund the legal battles. Waid took to his website and across social media to explain how the lawsuit represented not just standing up for himself, but for all women, trans people, queer people, and the people of color who work in the comic book industry.
mhm.
And a bit hyperbolic, but I would agree with that. Like,
Yeah.
you know, the legal battle would continue until 2020 when a joint statement was released stating that Meyer had voluntarily dismissed the lawsuit. So about 2 years ago, they just said, fuck it, we're not even going to, like, we're done, you know?
Yeah.
Part of Meyer's argument is that the lawsuit came about due to Jawbreakers losing out on a publishing deal. And since the book was later published and COVID-19 significantly impacted both the industry and the world, there was no reason to continue in a legal setting.
Right.
This is all true and good on Meyer for the dismissal, but I think it also does a disservice to our show if we don't look into any other reasons that this might have happened.
I was gonna say, like, I think somebody realized that they were wrong and didn't wanna deal with the consequences.
When we started this series by detailing the events leading up to and including Gamergate, there was a reason I wanted to heavily focus on some of the frontrunners like Milo Yiannopoulos or Mike Cernovich. Throughout the onslaught of harassment, the inevitable benefactors of attention were those who could speak loudly and with enough vitriol to gather support. This had the effect of both normalizing this behavior within and to an extent surrounding the community. But it
Yeah.
also meant that these people were primed as front runners of the movement and to some demagogues. With the rise of this specific type of attention economy came opportunities for actual financial gain. After all, if they hold the minds and at least some respect of thousands of people, how hard could it be to also earn their dollars?
Yeah.
When discussing these specific events, it is important to remember that the currency that they barter with is both attention and monetary. When
Mhm.
criticized for what they say, they always position themselves as underdogs fighting censorship, and therefore are deserving of more attention and more money for the fight. Richard C. Meyer, Ethan Van Sciver, and others in ComicsGate are not quiet about how much money matters to their movement. When they flaunt how much a particular project made via a crowdfunding campaign, they use that as a way of validating the emotions of their followers. The
Right.
comic book community outside of ComicsGate is failing in their eyes, and any money that is made is always seen to be lesser than that of a ComicsGate project. The logic that they use is that if you donate to our projects, then you are right and can use the act itself as evidence of such. And there are many flaws to this thinking, with perhaps the biggest being that there are hundreds more titles of mainstream comics as there are ComicsGate projects, which means that the pool of money is split up much more.
Right.
And in addition, most publishers don't crowdfund all of their projects and instead operate on a smaller scale budget with much clearer oversight to how that money is actually spent, which is rarely ever seen in ComicsGate. So you get like all of this money and they never really tell you where it goes.
Yeah. It's kind of like with the Academy or, like, the foreign press or something like that. Like,
Mhm.
why all people are, like, mad at the Golden Globes, it's 'cause, like, they all just really wanna meet celebrities, and it's like, money goes into that, like, organization, and it somehow gets distributed, even though those
Right.
people aren't technically paid, but 100% those people are getting that money. So,
So
what a
this
time.
brings the focus back around to Gamergate and Meyer. The lawsuit filed against Wade garnered lots of attention and fulfilled a deep emotional need for ComicsGate followers.
Mhm.
Wade was seen as the leftist comics writer who was always inserting politics into his books. And now ComicsGate had a much more direct fight against a perceived enemy. With this more direct fight comes more direct participation and therefore fundraising. And this is how the feelings of victimization and vindication collide. This is where you get people donating thousands of dollars to like a legal fund, and
Yeah.
also we're going to buy this book because we're going to show that leftist comics writer that we are big and we are important and our feelings matter.
Yeah.
So the legal battle itself didn't really matter. What mattered was that attention right before it.
Yes.
You know, he probably spent thousands of dollars going through all of this, but I'm sure he made it all back, you know.
Oh, yeah.
It was
Especially
just,
if the whole trial didn't even happen.
yeah, I mean,
Like,
you still have some legal fees,
oh, for
but
sure.
like I'm
He paid
sure,
lawyer for a little bit of his time,
yeah,
but
it's crazy. It's
yeah.
there is, I mean, I can't say for certain that that was the idea behind it. Um, but I can definitely say that that is something that, regardless of if he actually intended it to, that was the outcome, you know?
Yeah.
Uh, so, when dealing with those who have a need to fulfill a victimhood narrative, it's easy to note that the most beneficial elements at their disposal is subtlety and cleverness. I mean, that is how you sort of skirt around a lot of this. You have to be a little bit subtle and you have to be somewhat clever in order to get your narrative across in any way that where people might buy it. It
Yeah,
can't
like, if
be
you're not really a victim, but you're trying to play a victim, you just have to be
Mhm,
manipulative.
right.
Yeah.
It can't be obvious how little power you have or how little anyone is trying to oppress you. They need to be seen as both the ones who can turn the tide, but not without the support in some way of their fans. And this is a delicate line to walk because if you fall further to one side, there is no need for your followers to support you because you're just as ineffectual as they tend to be. And if you fall further on the other side, you shouldn't need their support. You're already powerful.
Yeah.
Why do you need your followers to support you? So
Exactly.
this balance is kept through that clever use of subtlety to present yourself as oppressed in a very specific set of instances. So our next subject, John De La Rose, lacks this fucking ability. He is not
Right.
subtle and he's not fucking clever. part of
Oh,
why I
he just sounds like one of those just big himbos,
part of why I kept
but,
coverage of
like,
this
in the
man
bad way.
to the
Oh,
very end is because while he shows up frequently in Comicsgate specific topics, he is laughably bad at the game.
heard.
During my research, I found several specific claims that only ever seem to come directly from John De La Rose, and he has complained on several occasions of persecution based on his deeply held religious beliefs, only for it to be revealed that he was never sanctioned in any way or that it was due to his harassment of others. So he's just real fucking loud, and then people are like, "You did this thing. We know it.
Yeah.
This is why." Like, um, In one video, he stated that Alterna Comics was publicly supportive of ComicsGate. I almost wrote that in because that was repeated several times, but the only source I ever found was this fucking video by this guy.
Mm.
And I haven't found any indication of this from anywhere else. So repeatedly throughout that same video, he affirms his status as a journalist to give himself credibility. He's like, hey, I'm a journalist, dude. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm a journalist, so I'm giving you all
Sure.
of the facts. And that's wonderful, except I'm going to spend a couple of short paragraphs ripping that credibility apart. We have too much to cover before we end our look at ComicsGate to spend an ounce of extra effort on someone who barely deserves mentioning. So here's a list of why this man should never be taken seriously as a journalist or as a fucking person. John Delarose is a science fiction author, one who often loudly proclaims his status as Christian, conservative, and Hispanic. After announcing his intention to wear a body cam at Worldcon, he was banned from attending due to what was seen as an intimidation tactic. After being removed from their site, Worldcon posted a statement of how they were in the process of removing racist, bullying elements from their convention. The use of the term racist without much merit is unfortunate, since Delarose took this to mean that the convention was calling him a racist and decided, on the advice of Christian nationalist Vox Day, to sue the organizers. So he gets called a racist and then goes to a racist to figure out what to do.
Great. What a
So
smart man.
he sued the
Woo-hoo.
organizers, San Francisco Science Fiction Conventions Incorporated, and this was eventually settled out of court. Delarose then sent a letter to Vox Day, which was published on his blog, stating, in early 2017, Vox Day gave me a platform on this blog to speak the truth about how the science fiction publishing and fandom communities had become nothing more than the toxic, gossip-filled political arms of the extreme Satanist, globalist elites. So, if any of that sounds familiar, it's because it is identical rhetoric to Alex Jones of InfoWars, which finds most of its conspiracy background from anti-Semitic propaganda like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And I have no proof that this is where Delarose gets his information, but Vox Day has been on InfoWars a few times, and this conspiracy is one that isn't only attributed to Jones. I mostly just want to point out how interconnected these people and ideas really are. So just
Yeah.
within this first story, we have ties to a Christian nationalist and assertions that the publishing community is run by satanic elites. This is an odd stance for a journalist to take. So I went to his
It
website to
really
see
sounds
what
like an Onion article.
I fucking know. I went to his website to see what journalistic credits he had, and it
Mhm.
turns out he is a contributor to The Federalist. The Federalist is an online magazine known for their extremely right-wing views and a
Yeah.
long list of reporting on misinformation about everything from vaccines to climate change. A quick glance at some of the articles written by Delarose show numerous articles about how political correctness is killing comics, how he was banned from Twitter after claiming transgenderism as a mental illness, and a guide to keeping your online browsing free of political propaganda, which is a bit fucking rich coming from specifically him at
Yeah.
specifically this website.
You're not gonna get any business if you share that article.
This isn't the end of the issues with Delarose, though. Author Jim C. Hines collected a list on his website of the long history of trolling and harassment coming from Delarose, from which I'll be heavily referencing for the rest of this, which is not very long, actually, but like I'm just going to just fucking highlight, right?
Let's
It's
go.
wonderfully sourced, and I recommend that everyone just take a quick glance over there because it was, if you just Google John Delarose, it's one of the first things that comes up, which I fucking love. John Delarose repeatedly insults others online by calling them autistic or some variation thereof. When
Aw.
not insulting others, he has spent his time complaining about being blackballed from Baycon in an act of discrimination, when actually it turns out that they just rotate who they invite each year. And he was asked back then at the next year's event. So he's like, they're discriminated against me. I'm banned from going here. And that specific convention was like, no, we just rotate. You're coming
Yeah.
back like,
You're
oh,
just not on the schedule.
right. And in alignment with some of the people we discussed before, Delarose has claimed that American Muslims should be forcibly converted to Christianity. He
Ugh.
repeatedly uses or promotes homophobic slurs and often misgenders other authors. In short, Delarose has shown himself to be an absolute ass who can't handle being held accountable for his own actions. He is a waste of literacy. I cannot overstate this. Just fuck this guy in all of
He really
his
does get like
bullshit.
a D minus on being a public figure.
And like
Like,
he's like,
I can't
I'm
give
a
him an F.
journalist.
I can't give him an F because he is doing things. So it's
Yeah.
like, he gets a participation sticker, which I'm sure he would hate. Judging by what this man's about. But ugh, there's
I
really not a lot of effort in here, I feel like. So I
there's
gotta
not a
give
lot
him
of
a D minus.
there's not a lot of effort, and it is also very heavily um skewed
Yeah.
toward like the fact that he's like trying to pass himself off as a journalist and then uh you going on about satanic globalist elites and crying about being banned from conventions is just it's laughable, you know.
Yeah, it's very silly. Silly is the word to describe many of the people a part of ComicsGate,
Yes.
and I'm putting the label on him. Silly man.
um so we're gonna change gears a little bit, and we're
Mhm.
gonna talk about someone I've actually talked about before on this show, and how they tie into Comicsgate. So in late 2018, previous subject of this show, Dave Sim, sent an open letter to comic book news and gossip website Bleeding Cool and addressed his letter to Ethan Van Sciver. At the time, Comicsgate and Van Sciver were engaged in a heated debate over whether or not the late comic artist Darwin Cook would be supportive of their movement. This caught the attention of Cook's widow, Marcia Cook, who vehemently disagreed and spoke out against Comicsgate as a whole by calling them crybaby losers.
What's her name? Martha?
Marcia.
Oh,
Marcia Cook.
Marsha? Oh, you go, Marsha. Good on you.
And I Darwin Cook is a or was a fantastic artist and writer. He did the New Frontier, which is a great book. They turned it into a like a DC animated movie. It is
Okay.
I think it might be my favorite DC animated movie.
Cool.
It's very like it's its own thing. It has nothing to do with any of the other ones.
Yeah.
Um, but it's really good. It's set in like I think the 50s, and it's
Fun.
right at the onset of the new crop of superheroes. It's an adaptation of the book. It very good. Highly
Cool.
recommend it if you ever get a chance. I think it's on HBO if you have that.
I do not, but maybe one day.
So from there, after she called them crybaby losers, her Twitter feed was bombarded with a dog pile of disagreements. Basically, everyone yelling at her because they're saying we know your husband better than you. Um,
Ugh.
when when Marcia pointed out that Van Sciver's followers continued to be transphobic about creators and also harass her, Van Sciver refused to denounce or call off any that were doing so. She specifically said, like, "Hey, they're doing this thing. Do you have anything to say?" And he did not. He never answered
Yeah.
that. And this is where Dave Sim's letter comes into play.
Okay.
For those that haven't listened to the episodes about Dave Sim, which would be episodes 6 and 7 of last season, titled Dave Fucking Sim, I'll give a brief description on who it is that we are discussing. Dave Sim is an independent comic creator who championed creators' rights, penned an epic 300-issue comic with only the artistic help of an amazingly talented background artist, and is a devout misogynist. I highly recommend listening to my previous episodes for a fuller understanding of just how misogynistic this person is. But to flesh it out a little further, he wrote several rants on how women use only emotions to make decisions and frequently pull logic away from men, started an argument with a female journalist within minutes of the interview beginning, and had to create a petition called Dave Sim is not a misogynist that anyone had to sign if they wanted to speak to him. The most important element of all of this, though, is that Dave Sim is also a groomer.
Oh, I
Dave's
got
letter
the
to
ick.
so we'll go a little bit more into this as we go on. But Dave's letter to Van Sciver was a show of support, which got the ball rolling on these two creators working together.
Mm.
Shortly after the publication of the letter, Van Sciver announced that Sim would be helping with Cyberfrog, Van Sciver's creator-owned book. For those not plugged into the indie scene of comic books, this is a huge fucking deal. As
Yeah.
much as Sim is as seen as the misogynist that he is, he's also seen as a masterful storyteller. There's a reason his comics still sell. Like I would not recommend reading them. It would just be supporting a terrible person.
Right.
Um, in my previous coverage, I did go through and I printed out there's a series of issues later on in his run on Cerebus, his book, where
Mhm.
he basically just writes prose and he writes it as a character that's very clearly him.
Right.
Um, and he spends long periods talking about how awful women are. Basically, he talks about
Ugh.
they are like, I forget this exact wording, but he basically describes them as like the black holes that suck the light out of men. Um, it's pretty fucking awful.
Yeah,
And it
he's
goes
pretty
it
deep down in that misogyny well.
and he claims it's not misogyny. He claims it's anti-feminism. Um
Okay, but I won't get into it. It's ugh. I think
so
you and I already know
yeah.
what I was probably gonna say.
Unfortunately, for everyone that was involved in this, like Van Sciver and Dave Sim, Renfamous, who we've discussed previously, pointed
Yeah.
out on Twitter Sim's very strange relationship with a 14-year-old girl.
Oh.
Sim met the girl as a teenager and would sporadically draw pictures of her, even commenting on her beauty. They remained in contact until she was in her 20s, when Sim admits that they had sex together.
Ugh.
Afterward, he would write about how wrong that situation was and how wrong he was for acting on it, but claimed that the only law he broke was the Mann Act, which prohibits transporting a minor across state borders for illegal acts. Now, for it's generally used for prostitution. Like
Yeah.
the idea is like you cannot take a minor across across state bounds for prostitution because then they can get you on like a federal charge, right?
Yeah.
He was never charged with such a crime, so that part could be accurate or just a misunderstanding of the law. His actions, however, were accurately described as grooming this child. You don't start a relationship with a teenager when you're an adult,
No.
um, and continue to comment on their beauty, like fly them places,
Yeah.
so that when they are of age, you have sex with them. Like
That's a lot
that's
like that
fucked up.
one guy, who drew for, like, Ren and Stimpy.
Oh, what happened here? I don't even know if I know about this.
Oh god, what was his name? Oh, I hope I have the right artist. Man, I really don't wanna, like, mess this one up. This is this is the part of the podcast where Corinne actually knows something that Derek might not know.
No,
Um,
I found it. I know
mm,
I
mm,
wow.
right? It's what's the guy's name?
I don't know how to pronounce it. Crick Falusi? Uh he
Yeah.
was an animator on Ren and Stimpy and started reaching out to people when they were like 14 and 16.
But that's basically yeah, like, he did the same thing, but with young artists that were women.
Look, there's
Young
th-
girls, he would groom them and be like, "Oh, you're gonna be a great artist one day. Boobs." And it was weird. Like, it was very inappropriate and not okay. But yeah, that reminds me of this Sims guy a lot.
there's a so comic books had their own Me Too movement, and
Gotcha.
one of the ones that one of the people that was called out on it was Warren Ellis. And um Warren Ellis, I actually was a big fan of his work, which makes it a little bit harder for me to deal with, because it's also like when I go back and read some of his stuff, I have to keep that in the back of my mind. But one of the things that he was accused of was not necessarily like young teenage girls, but um, younger artists trying to break into the industry, you know?
Yeah.
So like adults, but there's a clear power imbalance, and you'd be like, oh, I'll help you. I'll
Yeah,
help
like
you.
they're
And then,
just out
you
of
know,
like art school or like university or
and
something.
he would do everything he could to sort of leverage his power over them to
Yeah.
start a like a sexual relationship with them, and then never actually like help them with anything. Uh,
Yeah.
it's unfortunately a common thing. Maybe not the 14-year-old girl common, like maybe that part's not common, but like that use of power, it
Yeah, it's the
definitely is.
power
You
abuse.
know?
Mhm.
So Van Sciver's initial public response to all of this information coming out was to defend Dave Sim by comparing his relationship with that of Elvis and Priscilla, which is actually true, but that doesn't quite let Sim off the hook so
Yeah,
much as
that
it shines a
doesn't
light
mean
on.
it's okay. It just means that this problem was happening years ago. People are also they did the same thing with like Robert Plant and like whatever, child he was dating at the
Yeah.
time. Like it's just a problem in 20-year intervals. Like
Well, and
but
there's
it's still happening everywhere all the time.
like Ted Nugent goes on to InfoWars and screams about how um they're out there grooming young kids with these like the drag queen story hour things. Like you have been credibly accused of very much grooming young women. Like
And
it's
like
fucking a
a
thing.
drag queen story hour sounds fun. I don't know
They
what it is. What is it just like what's her what I can't remember
it's just they
any of their names
it's
of
just
drag
drag
queen names.
queens. They come in and they read stories. That's it.
Yeah,
That's it.
that
That's
sounds
all
so
it is.
fun.
It's great. No one gives a shit.
I feel
But
like that's
because
the equivalent of like someone dressing up as a princess and going to your birthday party.
it's I mean basically, but
Yeah,
if you the
it's
fact
cool
that
people in cool costume
it
playing a character.
it's specifically on the right. Specifically like right-wing nut jobs are screaming about how this is a sexual thing. And it's like I don't like what
Oh,
is sexual.
pshoo.
It's
Go
crazy.
home and sit down and take a nap. I'm just that's the phrase of the week apparently, is go
Like,
home and take a nap.
just go to bed.
Go to
Just
bed. It's
go to bed.
bedtime. Go bed. Got bad thoughts, go to bed. I just man, I'm mad.
So eventually Van Sciver, even though he went to Dave Sim's defense, he did
Right.
relent and he decided to remove Dave Sim from the project altogether.
Okay.
So good on you, Van Sciver. Kind of weird that it took you a while to get to there, but like fucking all right, man. We're behind you on this one at least. And while this could have been handled much better, uh, I do need to like. I mean, I'm kind of being facetious when I say like good on you.
Yeah.
I do need to actually say, like, you did the right thing in this instance. Good job. Like, you took a while to get there,
Yeah.
but eventually you did the right thing. So
Eventually.
let's
Probably
let's
when
be a
it benefited him, but like
let's be a little fair here. Well, if he had Dave Sim on there, it could have cut into his money.
yeah, exactly.
So the main final thing that I want to discuss when it comes to Comicsgate, um, before we wrap everything up, I actually want to cover how not to cover them. So,
Cool.
a common logical fallacy found in places like CNN, Fox, or MSNBC is that of false equivalence. So, when it's the same as like sort of the balance fallacy, right? When
Mhm.
two people are invited onto the show to debate the merits of a topic, this presents both sides as having an equal ground. When this topic is something like the efficacy of vaccines, it actually does more to bolster the argument of those that have little to no backing from the scientific community. The same thing applies when you talk about Comicsgate or you talk about a hate campaign in general. In 2018, the Jim Jeffries show on Comedy Central decided to run a piece on Richard C. Meyer.
Mhm.
And while they're not a news outlet, there are still practices that can be followed to mitigate any harm that could come from such a piece. And while Meyer may have been roundly mocked during his exposure, Comedy
Right.
Central's approach did little to expose why this man is a problem. So,
Ah.
I don't know. Are you aware of Jim Jeffries? Do you know who Jim Jeffries is?
He sounds familiar. Probably
So,
because he is on Comedy Central. I'm gonna look up a
uh,
picture of him, and then I
he's
will
a
perhaps
he's
know
an
for sure.
Australian comedian, and um, I most likely you he had an FX show that I actually quite liked. That was kind of based on his life. He has done pretty viral jokes about gun rights,
He
and
looks familiar.
yeah. So I like him to an extent. I will say he has very edgy comedy where he says a lot of the things that ComicsGate will say. It's just
Yeah.
very clear that he's joking during all of these, you know? Um,
Yeah, and
so
then some people he might interview and think that it's like they're on his
it's a
side or
weird
whatever.
it's a weird thing because it's like I kind of get it when he does a lot, like he'll do misogynistic jokes, and it's weird because it's like I get that you are telling a joke and therefore I can kind of let my guard down and think it's funny.
Yeah, because it's
However,
like, is he doing it like, because some people will make like misogynistic jokes, but have a level of sarcasm to it where it's like, I'm telling this joke, but I'm saying it in a sarcastic light. So like people can see how stupid that this legitimate thought would be. Is
it's
it
a
kind of
bit
like
of
that?
it's a bit of that. I will say it's sometimes it's hard to get that across, and like um I've watched some of his stuff and I've been like, oh jeez.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
but
Because
in
it's hard to
general,
do that. Like,
right. In general, I do I tend to think he's kind of funny. Um and look, Australian accents are hysterical.
I love a
Just
lot of Australian content. Let me
I
tell
know
you,
you do.
most of the podcasts that I listen to, that's why I was like, I might know 'em, are like Australian podcasts. And it's like, it's just what I got. It's that, and then like Nicole Byer stuff, because I just love her. Um, but no, I definitely get trapped in the podcast world of Australians, and it's really fun. And then recently, oh, this was another bright spot that I didn't think of until just now. Do you know who
Mhm.
Randy Feltface is?
No.
Oh, he's just like, he's an Australian comic, but he does it all with this purple puppet.
Oh, I love that.
So it's just like you're just getting stand up from a purple puppet, and you don't see the man at all. Like it's as if Kermit the Frog just did stand up.
Mhm.
And but he's Australian, and it was watched one of his specials, and it was very fun. Um anyway, I'm done with my Australian haha tangent. We can keep going.
The other thing about Jim Jeffries is like he's
Yeah.
done several interviews for his show before, and they're heavily edited. But the problem that I tend to have with them is like there's a level of heavily editing interviews that you're just doing a disservice to what you're trying to get across. Yes, it's
Yeah.
funny, but like people just get to point to the fact that you heavily edited them to be like you're the asshole in this situation. So I've gone back and forth with I just don't really care so much
Especially
about
when
his
you're
show.
doing something like that and your platform's that large, you know?
it's it's weird. I'm like I'm not against Jim Jeffries at all. It's just it's a strange strange world I sit in where
Yeah.
I'm always sort of on the fence on whether or not I actually care.
Yeah.
Um so Meyer is introduced and shamed almost immediately for his dislike of minority characters and his annoyance at some female characters' smaller breast size.
Oh
Like that's the
god.
thing. It just keeps coming. He talks about how like Supergirl's breasts seem to keep getting smaller and smaller as like the years go on. And I think some of that is probably just because like um in the early years a lot of female characters were drawn with just large breasts. And then
Yeah.
as we've gotten into the modern era, and we've thought about like, well, how old is this character, and what sort of body size can we like have, like, it's just changed.
Yeah, you, like, actually think about the character and not just, like, as a
Boobs.
character, instead of just being like, "Oh, it's a lady, we gotta have big beach balls in front of her chest."
Right.
Like
And so Meyer's responses are quickly edited, bringing laughs from the audience in attendance. That's just part of Jim Jeffries' show. And while Jim Jeffries makes a joke of Meyer's stances, it just like keeps going like that, where like they're just mocking him over and over.
right,
And later, multiple cosplayers and comic fans were interviewed about Meyer, where they give quick rebuttals to the arguments that comics are too political and largely speak against Meyer as a whole. And there are several issues here. For one, they allow Meyer to come onto the show to be humanized through deceitful editing, giving him the opportunity to say that he was mistreated, and they give him the ability to make a statement that calling a woman a cum dumpster was a mistake, even though he continues this type of behavior. So he goes on the show and he's like, "Yeah, I should not have done that." It's like, okay, well,
yeah.
what have you done to change your actions then?
Also, a mistake? Like, you had to think again, I think I said it in the first episode, and I say it every time the cum dumpster comes on. You have to have thought of that and chosen to say that because that again, that's not just like accidentally like slipping bitch out there. Like
Yeah,
you genuinely were like, I'm gonna say something specific and I think it's witty. Like, let me put it out there in the universe. And he did that. Like, that's not you 100. That wasn't like, oopsies. I
right.
stepped
No,
on a
this was
rake this morning. Like,
especially in context to the greater video where it was
yeah,
just a series of bullshit like that,
yeah,
there's the same video where he was telling people that like certain people sucked their way into the industry, and it's like, oh, come on, man. Like, that's like the fact that you use the word cum dumpster is not necessarily the problem. It's like
yeah.
what you were, it's the
It's
everything
what you're
behind what you were
saying as a
saying.
whole, yeah.
Right.
Like, I know that, like, again, wow, man, we really talk about cum dumpster so much in this series. It's really fascinating. And it's like, yeah, at face value, you look at that and you're like, "Oh, cum dumpster, haha, that's so funny." And you picture what? You picture literally a dumpster full of full of semen. And then but you know that he's using that to describe a human being, like a human woman. So then you
Mhm.
put those 2 together, and that's, like, so objectifying. It's just like, ugh.
And look, between two consenting adults, there is a form of like, you can objectify someone and even use that term with each other if you want to.
Oh, yeah,
But
like, we can giggle about it because,
the
like, we know the context of each other, but this man has a platform that,
there
like,
yeah,
other
it's
people will
it's
abuse
everything
that.
behind how he says it is the problem.
Yeah,
It's not
100%.
just the fucking word.
It's not
And
just the word, it's the image you're putting out there and why you're putting it out there and who you are.
so his role in the online harassment is downplayed because the actual nature and human element of it is almost entirely removed from the coverage.
Right.
Never once does the show mention ComicsGate or Ethan Van Sciver or the ongoing responsibility that these people sideline. Jeffries also interviewed the comic fans in cosplay and treated their love of comics largely as a joke, while Meyer is presented in regular attire. Meyer has the ability to seem more presentable in this situation by the simple fact that both sides are mocked. So, like, you bring on cosplayers to talk about how shitty Meyer is, but like during that time, they're all dressed up as different like superheroes and stuff like that. They
Yeah.
kind of joke about the fact that like these people are that dedicated to comic books. And then you have Richard C. Meyer on, and while yeah, you're mocking him, you bring him on in just like regular clothing and
Yeah.
treat, you're treating him very differently. It's weird. I don't know what decisions they were making when they made this. Like, I'm not, again, it's not awful. It's just you're just missing what could have been good, you know?
Yeah, it seems like this segment is almost trying it's like a poorly done Billy on the Street. 'Cause, like, at
A
least
little bit. It's kind of like the Stephen, when Stephen Colbert had the Colbert Report, and he would
yeah.
interview people. It's a little like that, in terms of like presentation.
Yeah.
Um,
No, that I can picture. I'm
mhm.
thinking just, I guess, specifically of the, like, oh, what do you think of, like, you know, Richard C. Like, Riley or whatever, and then
Richard C. Riley.
I can't get his name right. I feel so bad. It's because I keep thinking of John C. Riley, and then I'm like,
Yeah, yeah.
I know it's not him, and I can't keep picturing him. The fucking cum dumpster man. Okay, that's what
Mhm.
we're going with. He
Come
said
dumpster
it.
man.
He's stuck with the title now. Um, but yeah, it makes me think of that because of Billy on the Street. I was literally just listening to, like, a segment of that where they have, John Oliver going
Oh
around with
yeah.
him, and they'll they'll ask, like, gay people if they care about John Oliver, and that's what this reminds me of, except there's just a pout because instead of talking to normal people on the street with John Oliver dressed as a normal person, you
Mhm.
have this weird, like, we're gonna talk to cosplayers who are probably now that they have this unknown camera shoved in their face, they're probably feeling a little vulnerable, like, and a little, like, "Oh,"
Well,
you
it's like
know?
he gathered them all up into like a room, and it's like they're all being interviewed together. So
Yeah.
it's like they are mildly prepared, like more prepared than like a Billy on the Street kind of thing.
Okay.
But it's just, again, it's weird because I don't understand the need to, um like, there is a mocking element to having them in cosplay and kind of
There
like,
is.
it's like you're not treating I cosplay is great,
Oh,
and
it's
there
very cool and creative, like, I'm a big fan of it. I don't do it myself, but,
no, I don't
like,
either.
maybe one day, like, if I ever went to it like, I haven't been to a Comic-Con ever because, like, I just when I started getting into comics, it was the pandemic. Um,
Mhm.
but I would like to go one year, and, like, maybe one year I would do, like, I don't know, I'd probably dress up as Goose. I would just get my overalls and, like, put a little nose on me or something. Like,
Right.
but I don't think I really admire the fact that people are able to be, like, so artistic and, like, creative and full on with their costumes, like, that's awesome. Um, but,
But, like,
it's
when
there's
you're
definitely, like,
interviewing
a
people, it's weird to bring in all of these people in cosplay, and then, like, that
yeah,
that becomes a joke in itself,
'cause
and
you're
that's
like
weird.
this was in 2018? Or
Yes.
yeah, so,
2018.
like, I feel like cosplay didn't start getting some sort of, like, clout or respect until, like, recently, when, like, a lot of, like, the aesthetic kind of communities, like, your cottagecore and your stuff like that, because that's
Mhm.
almost everyday cosplay, and then, you have these people who are, like, using TikTok and stuff more, and then they, are getting more, like, appreciation for their work. Feel like if you asked people, like, in 2018 or 2017, like, "Oh, you cosplay?" Like, there was a weird connotation on those people for a while, unfortunately. So, like, you put them on TV in these costumes on a comedy channel, like, it's 100% gonna look like they're making being made fun of. Like
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. It's for me, I've always had like a an affinity for like cosplayers. Like, that's I kind of grew up with that as someone who's into this thing. So I don't know like the mainstream view of
I thought they were
cosplay.
cool and fine, like, myself. My
Yeah, yeah.
brother cosplays, so it's like, I know somebody who does it, like, it's personal to me, like, so to me, I don't see it that way, but I would 100 like, people from, like, our high school or, like, people that I would talk to, like, in college, like, would have this, like, "Oh, like, you're a cosplayer?" Like, "Oh my god," like, "That's so" like, "This person does this? It's so weird," and it's like, "That's stupid that you
Well,
think that, but
there's
okay."
another like layer to that too. I remember a few years ago there was a movement called cosplay does not equal consent. Um
Exactly. Yeah, that too, where it's like, these women dress up and then they're like, "Oh my god, can I take a picture with you?" and, like, push your butt and stuff, and it's like, "No, stop."
or just, they just do it and don't
Yeah.
ask. And that's fucked up and that's weird. There's a lot in the world that's just not right. around things.
Yeah. Again, people need
Um,
to go home and take a nap and fix themselves, but
right.
whatever.
Uh, Complicating things a little bit further, Comedy Central had reached out to Heather Antos, one of the first victims of ComicsGate, one of the milkshake crew, right?
Yeah.
Um, they asked to have her on the show as well. She refused, and according to her, the producers stopped answering her emails directly after. So she was like, "No, I don't want to be on the show. I don't want to be part of this." And while she was trying to get more info on them, or even just to give information to them, they just never responded, which
Oh.
is a little weird because it's like, "Oh, we're not getting something out of you. You mean nothing now."
Or, like, I guess, like, I don't know, a positive way to look at it, it was because I don't know what the emails were, but it was
Mhm.
probably like, "Oh, would you like to be on our show?" And then, if, like, this is the segment we're doing, and if they're just kind of like, "No, I'm not interested, if you need any help, that's fine. I just don't wanna be on the show." Maybe it was just like, "Okay, they don't wanna be on the show,
I,
like, I guess we'll just move on." But I have no idea. It is a little weird that they're not just like, an email back like, "Okay, no worries, like, thank you for answering," but maybe that's just how I respond to emails.
Yeah, I don't know either. I'm just basing off of like what Heather Antos has said online. Like cuz
Oh, then yeah, it probably is weird if she has, like, come out with information. But
she later like she went on, she was like letting it be known like, look, this is just Meyer seeking another spotlight. He's just looking for more attention. And the fact that Comedy Central is providing it um is kind of fucked up, and that the show put no thought into how this could possibly affect the targets of his campaign.
yeah.
People like Heather Antos, like it's just being funneled to her again. You know,
Yeah.
and when Jim Jeffries released the segment for his show, it was at the expense of the wishes of the victims, and proved it just gave ammo solely for Comicsgate. So
Right.
like to the point, Bounding into Comics ran an article criticizing the segment while using anti-Comicsgate voices to bolster their arguments. So even the propaganda wing, basically, of Comicsgate ran an article saying, "Hey, all of these people who are against Comicsgate also hate this thing."
Yeah.
So shortly after, Meyer responded to the video claiming that this was done entirely to boost his brand before stating, quote, regarding the Jim Jeffries video, I'd describe it as an egregiously edited hit piece that has hilariously backfired. My enemies are gnashing their teeth over it, and even his own fans realize it is a viciously inept hatchet job. Regarding his pearl clutching over the fourth grade swear words I once used in a single video 9 months ago, I'm arching an eyebrow higher than his at the 10 years of misogynistic rape jokes that he built his stand up career on.
Mm.
I could tell he had an abiding interest in diversity since one person out of his 10-person crew wasn't white. Which, look, that the fact that he has like one person on his crew that's not white, possibly good thing to point out. But
Yeah.
you're yelling at someone for diversity. Look at your own group. I understand that. I have no idea if that's true or not, but
Right.
like, if that is the case, that is a valid thing. It's also valid that Jim Jeffries spent a good amount of his career making misogynistic jokes. And there is a way to look at that as very negative and not like,
Well, yeah,
not
especially
how
if
we,
they're like, if it is true that because I haven't really I've only seen his face. I don't think I've really listened to his content. Um, but, like, I know I wouldn't be too keen on hearing, like, rape jokes. Like, I don't think I'm pretty, like, flexible on, like, my comedy. I think I
right.
listen to, like, a lot of different, genres, and I listen to a lot of different people. I don't think I would have a particular good time hearing a rape joke from any of the comedians that I listen to. Um, so, yeah, I think that is a valid criticism, um, from this person,
Right. So, I mean,
supposedly.
you get, this is a way that they were trying to cover Meyer, trying to mock him. And it's like, it works in two different ways
Mhm.
because um, Meyer is both boosted by this because it kind of is shitty of Comedy Central and Jim Jeffries to do it the way that they did.
Yeah.
Um, but it also sort of diminishes his role because he is so widely mocked on a national scale through Comedy Central. It
Right.
like I would, regardless of the outcome, like he is not as big in Comicsgate as he once was, and this is part of that.
Yeah.
Um, I would argue that it was still done poorly. You know,
Yeah.
like the outcome was probably preferable, but you still fumbled so fucking badly on it.
It was a
Um,
very, like, stumbly finish, like, the
right,
landing did not stick.
right.
Um, yeah, just kinda it's almost like an awkward goodbye, like, you go to say bye to people, and then you end up walking the same direction to your car. It yeah, it's just
Yeah,
kind of it's crunchy. It's
it's
crunchy.
and the takedown of Richard C. Meyer, that really did little other than to just give Ethan Van Sciver more of the reins of Comicsgate. Like he's now the clear commander of it, you know.
Right.
Um, some saw Meyer's agreement to join Comedy Central for a segment embarrassing from the start. Others rightly realized that some things are better off left out of the mainstream. The takeaway that I personally got from the whole ordeal was that the coverage of the group, so quick to play the victim, needs to be thorough, and at no point should they be allowed to take the attention away from the victims of their campaign. We've done a lot of talk about them on this show. One of the
Yes.
things that I think needs to be really drilled home is, if you're talking about it, you need to talk about like the actual human elements, the people that are being brought down. And I think we've done a good job of at least mentioning that. And the
Yeah.
second thing is, you really need to make it be known why this is a problem. Do
Mhm.
not let it like, there's no room for error here. You know, you have to cover them in their entirety. And there's stuff that we haven't gone over with Comicsgate because it's just repetition. But what really it needs to be, like, the movement needs to be made clear. The
Yeah.
actions need to be made clear, and the light needs to be shown directly on what they have done. And I think that I'm hoping anyway, after 6 episodes with four four of them specifically about Comicsgate and two of them everything that led to Comicsgate, including like why their name is Comicsgate. It comes out of Gamergate.
Yeah.
Like, I think that we've done a good job of being of pointing out the fucking problems with their movement.
Yeah.
We did almost an entire episode on what they believe and why it's bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, like, hey, from the fact that like now in episode 6 I can understand like details and like patterns in the movement,
Mhm.
I would say that the thorough research has paid off because you have had a once clueless person now understands and remembers names and all of that. So I I think it's been stamp of approval. We've learned the thing and we understand it.
Well, I very much appreciate it. And so the reasons for a rise in movements like Gamergate, QAnon, the Proud Boys, Comicsgate, and others like them, those aren't easy to dissect. You know, that's why I spent so long putting together all of the information that I could. And that's why I wanted to have all of this written before we even started,
Yeah,
you know?
it's almost like trying to figure out why things happen, just like it's almost just trying to study like sociology basically. Because
Yeah.
like people will be like, "Oh, like this war was won." So like all these things happen. It's like, "Okay, well no, like there's like all these other tiny things that happened like, you know." So, it's never just one thing and it's never like, as we've kind of seen like it's never one person just being like a clear bad guy or like, it seems like a lot of these people are trying to make things very black and white. And I think that's
Hmm.
kind of the problem with the argument because like
Right.
that is never how anything is in life. Everything is a big gray area. Like, you know,
Absolutely.
like Mr. Cum Dumpster Man, like, you know, he got made fun of on national TV and has maybe
Hmm.
done like one or two things like good in his life, but overall, like this is what he was advocating for. So like,
Yeah.
that's not
There.
great. He's maybe on a certain shade of gray that I don't like.
Yeah.
um so yeah, it's been very interesting learning about these people and like their opinions. And for some of them, I'm a little worried and I feel bad for them. But on the grand scheme of things, I think the best thing we can take out of it is just if you have just keep liking what you like, and your stuff will be supported. Like I really like inclusivity in my comics of just all
Mhm.
different kinds of people. And I'm still going to read what I like, which means I'm going to have to purchase the things that I like. So
Right.
that's going to show. And it seems like it is showing with everybody else. So like I'm not too worried about it. Yeah, and it's not on my algorithm. So that's nice. It still isn't there, everybody. It's still just cats.
A frequent undercurrent seen and often commented by those that study fascism is the need to call back to a better time. Like that's when you get the everything's bad now. We need to go back to the "Make America Great Again."
Yes.
That's a thing. This is perhaps best known from Umberto Eco's essay Fascism," but it's
Mhm.
relevant here not for the fascistic leanings of these groups. I would argue that that's fair, but it's relevant because it is a wonderful recruiting tactic.
Yeah.
Learning history is often depressing, and dealing with changes in how we feel about ourselves and the world can lead to drastic actions. It's hard to discuss depressing topics all the time. It takes a toll on the mind that is hard to pay. It's often seen as better to imagine the world was once more pure because when you were younger or more naive, it actually felt that way. Anger and fear are addictive emotions, but they become increasingly so when tied with the notion that there was once some happiness that we can return to. That's one of the things that I like when starting the episodes. I liked the idea of doing a bright spot because I liked let's talk about something good, you know?
Yeah, and
Um,
it's also let's talk about something that's good and current. 'Cause
yes.
that just equally proves that it's like, you know, things can be shitty now, but things are also good now. Like,
Hmm.
we do still get great sandwiches and pretty
And
inclusive
lemonade.
people and watery lemonade from a kid down my block.
So, a fundamental problem that I see recurring within groups that reject hateful rhetoric and ideologies is that they tend to become just as obsessed with combating hate as the perpetrators are with sustaining it.
Yeah.
Embracing happiness, however it comes, should be just as important. For those whose lives have been dragged down by the hateful few, I hope they find a way to seek out the good that can keep them going. Negativity can be just as toxic if held within as it is coming from the outside. And this is one reason that I'm really trying to drill home
Yeah.
that we started with the bright spot. We kind of make jokes throughout. We're having a good time in learning about these things. And yes, it's very depressing, but like there's some fun to be had with it, right?
Yeah. And I mean, like, and again, I think it's also one of those things where it's like, we already have so many people on the internet, like, and probably a lot of these people included both on anti and pro ComicsGate.
Hmm.
And I said it in the last episode where everybody's just screaming at each other on the internet. But it's like with this, like, yeah, we're talking about it, and there are definitely points where like the Corinne is upset counter came on. Um, but like in the end, it's like we're just having a discussion about it. Like, you know, there is no
Yeah.
screaming at like, these people. I am not gonna log off on this Zencaster recording and be like, fuck you. Like Ethan Van Sausage. Like, I'm never gonna say his name right again. Also, I'm so sorry. I can't pronounce anything after Van. I'm just gonna keep changing it. But it's
Hmm.
like I don't have the negative energy in my life to just like, go find him and fuck up my algorithm and be
Right.
like, I hate you. Like, I don't know. I think just like the best thing that you can do is if you find a real person in real life, um, who is saying stuff like this, maybe you just talk to him a little bit before you jump on I hate you. Like I have a coworker who's like he's like 40, I think. He may be like 39. I don't know. But like he has some very different thoughts. And I mean, they're not about comics because nobody I know except for like you and like three other people read comics in my in my friend group. Um, but like again, I studied, like, nutrition, and he was a doctor who's gone, like, full holistic, and, like oh, maybe I shouldn't say that. I don't know if he'll listen. I don't think I've told him about the
Mhm.
podcast. Maybe he won't. I don't know. But we have some very different opinions, and you know what? Like, he's still fine to work with. Like, I just,
You
kindly
can
will be like,
disagree.
"I don't
Yeah.
agree with this, and here are my thoughts," and, like, it's totally fine, and maybe I've changed his opinion about some things, and, like, maybe I've, like, listened in and, like, thought a little bit about some other things that maybe I didn't know. Like, that's what life is. It's talking to people and just kindly trying to understand each other. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's why I don't like Twitter.
Twitter is a bit of a hellhole. I totally understand.
It
Like
is. I
we
think if people talked a little nicer on it, like, if you just remembered that they're real people, like,
yeah.
they're you would actually think before you doxed them. Think before you dox, kids.
I've
That's
had
important.
I've had several instances where I've gone too far down the rabbit hole of being obsessive. Like I've said, I spend a lot of my time listening to conspiracy theorists, and there's a lot of hateful rhetoric that comes from it. I've spent a lot of time listening to Ethan Van Sciver and a lot of the hateful rhetoric that comes out of that. And there is a point where it just becomes a little too much, and I've had to take steps away to oh, I've realized I've been clenching my jaw for an entire week. I need,
Yeah.
maybe I need to de-stress for a bit. There's personal health that should go into it too,
Yeah, I think
and
that's the whole thing, like, it really kinda came up in 2020, like, of what is, like, burnout and,
mhm.
how can we prevent ourselves from doing that? Like, I try to be the best ally I can be. I definitely, like, mispronounce things or, will mess up every once in a while, but it's like or like, oh, like when I was reading Bottom Feeder, like I had like 2 nights where I was like, "Oh no, like gentrification's scary." And like I was thinking about it and I was like, "Oh, the town I live in right now, like the main street near me, a lot of before I moved here like, I don't know, maybe like a year ago, like a little over a year ago. And everybody used to be like, "Oh, like this main street used to be so like, bad and like gross and all this stuff. But now it's like getting nice." And I'm looking around at it and it's like I see like, the breweries that have been here for like a couple years, like not too long, like less
Mhm.
than 10 years for sure. And like a boutique pops up every once in a while. And then I do see like a lot of like, smaller like Latinx businesses. And I'm like, shit, am I living in like an area that's currently getting like gentrified? And I was like, "Oh my god, like, what do I do? Like, I just messed up the system." But then I was like, "No, like, stop. Stop freaking yourself out. Like, just, like, it go support the people that you know that are good, like, and don't worry. Just
Well,
be
there
aware
seemed to
and,
be
like,
like
live your life."
a subtle bit of at least internalized racism if it's like the idea that it's like, oh, it's getting better now. Is that, are you saying that because you see more white people around?
Yeah, that's, like, what's making me wonder. I'm like, "Why are you saying like, do you just mean, like, the businesses look more like, of a certain way? Like, what are you implying here? Like these people were doing fine. I think. Like they seem
Yeah.
fine.
Well,
Nobody seems
the
like they're about to kill me when I walk on the street. And I feel like if I did that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it would still probably be fine if I was like walking around their street. Like, but
I think with in bottom feeders, I think part of the issue with the gentrification wasn't just like, oh, it's not like just white people are moving in, but it's like someone bought out the building
someone
to
bought the building.
to intentionally get white people in and like mark
Yeah.
up prices and get people out. And it's like that's a big like you're in on an individual scale, you can't quite help it as much as
Oh,
like that's a
100%.
big
I
thing.
did
Yeah.
realize that after, like, a day or 2 of, like, thinking about it. And, like, again, it's one of those things where it's like, you can feel like, if you gotta feel like a couple seconds of, like, "Oh, shit, am I doing okay as an ally, or like, oh shit, like,
Am I a part of the problem?
am I a part of the problem? Yeah. But it's like if you are worrying about that and you are aware now of the problem, but you're still
Hmm.
doing what you can to be a good person, then like no, you're not a part of the problem. Like you can still consciously like go support like your main street cafe that's been there for before the neighborhood was considered good, quote unquote. So I was like, oh, I got nothing to worry about. Like we're okay then.
So I want to end our coverage of ComicsGate with a few suggestions on how to push the needle a little bit more to the positive side of the scale.
Heck yeah.
If you find yourself in a situation where you are being harassed, the block or mute button is obviously going to be your friend. That's there are block bots out there that you can you blockchains and things like that. I mean, we've talked about those in the past, and as long as you're not working for fucking Alterna, you can use those. Those are great.
Woohoo!
You should report harassers to the social media platform that they're using, call the local police, and keep records of everything. Sometimes this isn't enough. But I have a few suggestions for how we can perhaps make a difference.
Yeah.
One of the resources available to combating all of the behavior we have detailed before is the Games and Online Harassment Hotline. Coming directly out of pioneering work established by Zoe Quinn and Crash Override, this new hotline brings decades of experiences in crisis help together with mental health and social services to take on sexism within the online and gaming communities. It is a free text message based, confidential, emotional support hotline that can offer in the moment help or find the referrals and resources victims may need. Fewer things can irritate serial harassers than seeing someone get the help that they actually need. So, this is a perfect way to help yourself and enjoy seeing the trolls online drive themselves crazy because they've been kicked out of your fucking life. And I
Also,
want to
it shows that you're not alone because there's a literal hotline that was created. Like,
right.
you're gonna be
And
okay.
I'm gonna throw this out there. We're not sponsored whatsoever. I just
No, we're not.
really appreciate the work that these people are doing. And in fact, the only thing that could irritate these trolls more is if this were somehow an organization run by a previous victim of online abuse. I mean, that would be pretty inspiring to others, right?
Yeah.
Guess fucking what?
Is
The
it?
game The Games and Online Harassment Hotline was founded in part by none other than the feminist media critic, Gamergate survivor, and all-around badass Anita Sarkeesian.
Woo woo!
So you can find more information on how to help or volunteer by going to gameshotline.org or texting support to 23368. If you are looking to donate, there's an option on their page for that specific thing. But I thought it would be a little fun to see if we could do more with this. Over the last few months of researching and writing for this series of episodes, I have had to spend an insane amount of time trudging through some of the worst that ComicsGate has had to offer. So, in the interest of expressing my deepest gratitude, I bought the domain name fuckcomicsgate.com. And if you enter this into your browser, it will take you directly. It will take you directly to the donation page for the Games and Online Harassment Hotline.
Oh, that's so funny.
There's an option to leave a message with every donation, and I sincerely hope that everyone listening will write even just a sentence about the wonderful work that these people are doing. They are actually trying to make a difference in the world, and they should be applauded for that. And I will also point out, this is coming out basically on my birthday, so it's a wonderful birthday gift to me if everyone just sends even $1, $5, whatever to this page.
Can you say the page one more time?
So if you go to fuckcomicsgate.com, it takes you right there.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm going to do it now. .com. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Ah, this is so great. This was the best surprise ending ever.
So finding support after dealing with harassment is one thing. And if there's anything we've learned from Anita Sarkeesian, it's that current laws don't really have the framework for how to deal with this type of abuse. There will need to be changes on how we handle everything from online stalking to direct targeted abuse so many of the people we have discussed have had to go through. It's
Mhm.
important to make sure our elected officials take this type of thing seriously and that they know that it's a topic that their constituents feel strongly about. The main problem here is that most people don't even know who their elected officials are or don't want to take the time to compose a letter. And that's why I put together a campaign where all you have to do is text PSJDDL to 50409 and you'll be immediately set up with a letter that you can send directly to your representative, even if you don't know their name. So again, that's PSJDDL to 50409 and you can finally do something about what has been a problem for years.
Yeah.
And if by chance Vox Day, Ethan Van Sciver, Richard C. Meyer, Avi Green, John De La Rose, or any of the other knuckleheads we spoke to or spoke about during our coverage are listening, go fuck yourselves. This concludes our look at ComicsGate, but I'm not opposed to coming back to see what more we can learn from these people we've discussed or the organization that support them. For now, though, I'm excited to take a break from some of the heavy research, and I might even come back for an episode or two about silly comic book characters. I think you and I were talking about a Batman one.
Yeah, we're talking about Batman. It's gonna be great.
There's plenty I want to write about and more I want to learn. I want to thank Corinne for being with
Aw,
me all of these episodes and providing some of the much needed levity during some of the heavier topics.
thanks for having me. Thanks for thanks for making me learn about all this stuff that I never thought of before.
I
It's
apologize
been
for
no,
for
it's been
dragging
great.
you through so
I've
much.
honestly been having a real great time. I love that in the end, there's a domain now that you now own.
Everyone out there, if you are listening at all, if you can spare even a single dollar, fuck comicsgate.com, send all of your anything that you can over to the games and online harassment hotline. It
Yeah,
would be
it
really
comes right up.
wonderful.
It would be
they're
great.
they're doing wonderful work. I really do think that they deserve it.
Yeah.
um
This has been great though. Thanks so much for having me. This has
Thank you for
been
coming on.
I'm so glad that this was like my first and probably only podcast that I'll ever be on. It's been a good one. I appreciate it.
I really appreciate you being here. So you can find more information, including all of the sources today for today's episode at comicallypedantic.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram by searching at Pedanticast and at Derek L. Chase on both platforms. New episodes will come out at some point in the future on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and at comicallypedantic.com. Though it might not be for a while. We're going to probably do a couple more episodes and then I'll be building up another big drop like this. You can support some of the truly amazing people doing good work by going to fuckcomicsgate.com. And if you have any comments or questions, you can send them in text or audio recording to comicallypedantic@gmail.com. Please indicate if you'd like your name or question read on the air. We will be back after a hiatus to research more episodes, but until then, you can find more exciting adventures at your local comic shop.